in the heart of a dusty West African town, where rust-colored roads twisted between sun-bleached buildings, and market stalls overflowed with fruit and chatter, there lived a woman named Emma. Every morning, as the first gold light spilled over the clay rooftops, Emma tied her scarf, picked up her orange woven basket, and walked to the market. She wasn't rich, she wasn't famous, but she was known by everyone. The tomato seller waved to her. The yam vendor gave her an extra bulb. Even the little barefoot children who roamed the alleys shouted "Amma" as she passed. But Emma wasn't walking to fill her basket just for herself. Her husband had died during the civil unrest years ago, and she lived alone in a clay house at the edge of the town. Her children had long moved to the city, yet still, she prepared 2 meals every day, one for herself and one for the crippled beggar who sat outside the old church ruins under the mango tree. He'd been there for months. No one knew his name. His left leg was twisted at an unnatural angle, and his face was always shaded by a frayed straw hat. He didn't speak much, only nodded when greeted. His clothes were always the same, a torn white tunic and muddy trousers. His crutches leaned against the mango tree like forgotten branches. Most people ignored him. Emma did in single quotes died. She saw him the first time on a Thursday, sitting silently while market-goers walked past. Something about his stillness struck her, not desperation. Dignity, the kind of quiet dignity that doesn't beg, but simply exists in plain sight. That afternoon, she brought him a bowl of rice and fried plantains. He didn't say thank you. He just looked into her eyes, as if memorizing the act, and then slowly began to eat. The next day, she came again, and the next, and the next. She didn't expect gratitude. She never asked his name, but she did speak to him. Small things at first. The yam lady was generous today, or there's a storm coming tomorrow. He never answered, but he listened. That was clear. One day, she asked, "Do you believe in God?" He looked up slowly. For the first time, he spoke. "God lives in food," he said simply, "and in the hands that give it." It was the first of many small sentences he offered her. The town began to talk. Why does Emma waste her time on that beggar? Some said, "He's cursed." Others whispered, "She's lost her mind." A few declared Emma ignored them all each day. She brought him food and sometimes books, old ones from her husband's shelf. She didn't know if he could read, but once she noticed the pages in his lap turned slightly from where they were before. She even gave him a pair of her late husband's shoes once. The left one was useless, of course. His twisted leg couldn't fit, but he accepted them and placed the good one beside his foot like a symbol. One Sunday, the rains came hard. Thunder cracked the sky. The mango tree bowed in the wind. Emma walked anyway. She held an umbrella over her basket and trudged through the mud, slippers sinking with every step. When she reached the church ruins, the beggar was drenched, curled against the stone wall, shivering. She dropped to her knees beside him, took off her shawl, and wrapped it around his shoulders. "You'll get sick," she said. He looked at her then, his eyes glassy, voice barely a whisper. "Why do you come?" Emma paused. "I come," she said, "because once, long ago, someone brought food to me when I had nothing, and he never asked why I deserved it." The beggar closed his eyes. That day, he said no words, but the next morning, she found a small, folded note beside the mango tree. It read, "If the world had more women like you, there would be no beggars." What Emma didn't know, what no one in the village knew, was that the beggar had not always been a cripple, or poor, or even unknown. He had once worn suits that cost more than the average home. He had once stood on stages in capital cities, his voice commanding rooms of leaders and economists. He had once signed checks that moved nations. He was Obasi Madu, a billionaire investor turned philanthropist, and he had vanished from public life 2 years ago after a scandal that wrongly accused him of embezzlement. A car crash followed. His legs shattered, his name ruined. He disappeared. He came here, to this village, to die quietly, or to disappear completely until Emma arrived and everything changed. Emma didn't know that the world she thought had abandoned her had once clung to the man she now fed. She didn't know the name Obasi Madu, but the rest of the world had once known it very well. Born into wealth, but raised with discipline, Obasis. Parents were educators, philosophers, not merchants. He studied abroad, earned degrees no one in the village could pronounce, and returned to Africa with a plan, not to run from it, but to rebuild it. He rose fast. tech, agriculture, banking, infrastructure. By 33, he was already being called the man with the Midas mind. But unlike many who reached the top, Obasi had one peculiar trait. He gave. He built shelters, schools, clinics. He believed Africa did not need saving from outsiders. It needed trust from its own sons. Then came the betrayal. A business partner forged documents. Accounts were drained. Reports twisted. The government turned on him. Media headlines turned cruel. The court dismissed the charges eventually, but the damage had been done. The day after the verdict, Obasi was driving alone through the mountains, away from the city, when a truck spun into his lane. The crash shattered his femur and collapsed his lung. He woke up 2 weeks later with a cane, a crooked leg, and a soul that had lost the will to rise. He vanished. No public statement, no news, no closure. Some believed he'd fled abroad. Others thought he'd taken his own life. Only one person knew the truth, a woman with an orange basket. As the months passed, Amma noticed something shift. The beggar, still nameless to her, began to engage more. He would nod when she spoke, sometimes even offer comments. "The markets are cruel," he said once, "not because they are evil, but because they have no memory." "What does that mean?" she asked. "It means even kings become ghosts if they stop feeding the machine." Amma didn't always understand his words, but she listened. She always listened. He once said, "There are 2 types of poor, those who never had, and those who had everything and lost it." She asked, "Which are you?" He looked at her with eyes full of 1,000 miles. "I'm both." One afternoon, she found him sketching with charcoal on a piece of cardboard, strange blueprints, diagrams, numbers. She asked what they were. "Memories," he said, "of what used to be in here." He tapped his head. Amma reached out and touched the paper gently. "Maybe you should share them with someone." He smiled faintly. "I already have." Rumors started to stir in the village. People said the beggar was strange, that Amma was being cursed by associating with him, that she should stop feeding him. "You give him power with your attention," they said. But Amma answered the same way every time. "One day, I was the beggar, and someone gave to me. Then one day, something strange happened. A tall man in a suit, not local, came to town. His shoes were polished. His watch gleamed. He asked around about an old beggar sitting by the mango tree. No one knows his name." They told him. But Amma noticed the visitor linger for a long time across the street, just staring. Later, that night, when Amma returned with dinner, she found the beggar unusually tense. "Do you know him?" she asked. He didn't respond. The next morning, the visitor was gone. Amma didn't ask again. But that night, as she swept her kitchen, she found something strange tucked into the folds of the beggar's food cloth. A checkbook. It was blank. But the name on the top corner read, "Madu Holdings." Amma sat down slowly, her heart pounding. She remembered now, somewhere in a newspaper her husband used to read, the name Obasi Madu. Could it be? The next day, she brought the food as usual, said nothing. He looked at her, then down at the checkbook in her hands. "So you know," he said quietly. Amma nodded. He exhaled. "I wasn't hiding from you," he said. "I was hiding from who I used to be." Amma knelt down beside him. She didn't ask questions. She didn't scold him. She simply said, "God doesn't send people food every day unless he still has a plan for them." That night, Obasi didn't sleep under the mango tree. He walked, slowly, painfully, with one crutch and one good leg, to Amma's home for the first time. He slept under a roof. Not as a billionaire, not as a beggar, but as a man who had been saved. The morning after Obasi spent the night under Amma's roof, the village whispered like dry leaves in Harmattan wind. Children peeked through windows. Traders nudged one another. The yam seller clucked her tongue. First she fed him. Now she shelters him. What's next? Marry him? Amma didn't care. She woke before dawn, as she always did, swept the compound, and brewed her spicy ginger tea in a rusted kettle that had seen better decades. When she brought a cup outside, Obasi was already sitting on her bench, leg propped up on a stool, a notebook open on his lap. "Morning," she said gently. He nodded, tapping a pencil. "Plans? Possibly. For what?" He turned the book toward her. In elegant penmanship were diagrams. Rows of gardens, solar panels, water catchments, and what appeared to be open market stalls. At the top, the Rise Village Initiative. Amma blinked. This is, he interrupted, softly, an idea, a dream, or maybe the last promise I ever made to my father. He told her the story, long before the scandal, before the wealth. Obasi had promised his dying father, a humble teacher, that one day he'd return to their ancestral village and build a place where no child went hungry, no woman suffered in silence, and no beggar died unseen. That village was never built. I let ambition swallow intention, he said, eyes lowered. I chased cities and profits, but when it all burned, what remained was this idea. Emma ran her fingers over the page. I don't have much, she said, but I know this land. I know its people. If you build this, they'll come. Obasi looked at her for a long moment. I can't do it alone. She smiled. You don't have to. So it began. Quietly, without fanfare. Obasi used the checkbook, just once. Not for himself, for the land. He bought a dry, abandoned plot at the edge of the village. 5 acres of forgotten dust and weeds. The elders raised eyebrows, but accepted the offer. No one knew who he was yet. Just Emma's man with a limp. He hired 3 young boys to help clear the brush, gave them gloves, paid them fairly. Then he called a meeting in the church. Ruins, only 12 people came, but he stood before them with confidence. We can build a place of dignity, he said, a community garden, a cooperative market, a learning shed. We don't need charity, we need structure. Some scoffed, some listened, but Emma stood beside him, arms folded, chin high. If he believes in us, she said, the least we can do is believe in ourselves. That night, the stars looked closer than ever, and the next day, 25 people showed up to work. Over the next few months, the land transformed. Dust became earth. Earth gave way to rows of green. Emma planted cassava herself, her hands thick with dirt. Obasi taught teenage boys how to use irrigation pipes. He worked slowly. His leg never fully recovered, but his mind was sharp and his resolve unshakable. Women brought pots of food. Children carried water buckets. And in the middle of it all, Emma and Obasi stood, not as savior and saved, but as co-builders of something ancient and new. One evening, after a long day of fencing the garden, Obasi sat under the mango tree, the very same tree where he once begged, and Emma joined him with 2 cups of tea. They didn't speak for a while. Then she asked, "Why didn't you tell me who you were?" He stared at the dusk. "Because I needed to know what I was without the money, the title, the name." Emma leaned her head against the bark. "And what did you find?" He turned to her, his voice soft. "You." Then, for the first time in all the months they'd known each other, he reached out and held her hand, not out of romance, but out of reverence, because she had fed him when he was invisible, and he had risen not because of wealth, but because a poor widow with a basket believed he was still worth saving. The following week, the mayor came to visit the land. He'd heard whispers of a project, land bought, people mobilized, crops thriving. When he arrived and saw the transformation, he was stunned. Who was behind this? Obasi stood in a clean shirt, cane in one hand. "I am." The mayor squinted. "And you are?" Obasi smiled. "A man who used to be a ghost. Now, I'm building a village for others who forgot they were alive." It was then that Emma stepped forward and added, "He was broken, but so was I, and this village, this Rise village, is where broken people remember their worth." The mayor nodded, slowly, respectfully. That night, he sent an official letter of partnership, local funding, support. Rise Village was no longer a dream. It was a revolution. By the end of the 3rd season, Rise Village had become more than land. It had become a miracle stitched together by sweat, hope, and the broken hearts that refused to stay shattered. The village now had a working solar well over 20 farming beds, a community learning hut built from recycled materials, an outdoor kitchen, and even a market corner where women sold soap, woven goods, roasted maize, and fresh cassava. And yet, the world still didn't know who Obasi really was. He had told no one beyond Emma. No press, no headlines, no internet presence. Until one afternoon, a young journalist named Quaim came wandering through the region on assignment. He had heard of a mysterious project started by a crippled beggar and an old widow. The story sounded mythical, exaggerated. He came to mock. Instead, he stayed to cry. Quaim interviewed the locals. An elder said, "This land used to choke with dust. Now it breathes." A teenage boy added, "I used to steal. Now I grow onions." A widowed mother whispered, "I found a voice here." Then he met Obasi, now standing tall even with his cane, leading a class of young men in basic financial literacy. Quame froze. He recognized the face, a little thinner, a little weathered, but unmistakable. Obasi Madu, the billionaire whose downfall had filled headlines 2 years ago. The ghost everyone thought had disappeared into luxury or madness was here, planting potatoes, teaching kids how to build rain harvest gutters, living in a clay house with a cracked window. Quame asked for an interview. Obasi declined. "I'm not here to be remembered," he said. "I'm here to repay a debt to the earth." But Amma stepped in. She looked Obasi in the eyes and said, "If your fall was public, then your redemption must be too." Obasi looked down at the soil in his palms. Slowly, he nodded. 3 weeks later, Quame's article exploded across the continent. The billionaire who chose the mud Obasi Madu rises again, but not how you'd expect a widow, a beggar, and the village that changed everything. Global media took notice. TV crews arrived. 8 agencies reached out. Even former business partners tried to reconnect. Obasi stayed calm, measured, humble. But Amma saw it all with suspicion. She had seen what wealth and recognition could do. It could distort good intentions. It could rip seeds from soil before they bore fruit. So she said one thing to Obasi: "Do not let them make you a king again. Kings forget who built the ground they stand on." Obasi smiled. "There are no thrones here, only benches." And yet, with the world's eyes now open, change came fast. The Rise village received infrastructure grants. A solar grid was donated. A mobile health clinic began bi-weekly visits. But none of it came without pressure. NGOs wanted naming rights. Investors wanted control. Politicians came with fake smiles. Obasi and Amma fought to protect the soul of the project. They created a council, elected locals, women and youth, to be decision makers. No single person held the keys. Not even Obasi. When asked why, he told one news anchor, "The future isn't built by saviors. It's built by survivors who finally found tools." But fame has a price. One day, Obasi received a letter, handwritten, the seal of his estranged brother, who hadn't spoken to him since the scandal. It read, "You've made a fool of our name. Come home. Let the family clean your image." Obasi didn't respond. Instead, he returned to the land. There, in silence, Amma found him planting lemon seeds. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded, slowly, then whispered, "The old world wants me to come back to fix my name. But this soil gave me a new one." Amma smiled. "You are not Madu the billionaire. You are Madu the builder." That night, Rise Village held its first community feast. Hundreds came. Candles lined the dirt paths. Boys played the gem. Girls danced barefoot. Women laughed with roasted maize in hand. The air smelled of yam and hope. Amma stood on a small platform. With Obasi beside her. She raised her calabash and said, "To the man who asked for nothing, to the land that gave us everything, to the beggar who remembered his worth, and to the woman who saw gold in his hunger." The crowd cheered. But Obasi stepped forward and added, "To the people who didn't wait for help, they built it themselves." That night, as the stars rose above the new solar lamps and laughter echoed into the hills, Amma sat beside Obasi on a bench they'd built together months ago. He looked at her, not with need, not with guilt, but with peace. "You saved me," he said. Amma shook her head. "No, I just fed you. You chose to live." Years passed, not in silence, but in harvests. The barren land was now a living map of miracles. Each patch of soil bore names: Ya's garden, Tamba's tools, Obasi's shade tree, Amma's bench. Rise Village had grown into something far beyond a project. It had become a movement. Other regions asked to replicate it. Students came to learn from it. Widows arrived with their children seeking shelter and purpose. But Amma remained the same. She still carried her orange basket, though now it was often full of seeds, not food. She taught women how to make soap, how to read, how to say "I deserve more" without flinching. And Obasi, he had shed his past like a snake's old skin. He walked now with less pain in his leg, but more clarity in his soul. He gave lectures, quietly, no cameras. He refused every award. He donated land, anonymously. He returned his entire remaining fortune into a trust, not bearing his name, but the name of the woman who once fed him without question. The Amma Foundation. One day, Emma found a leather envelope on her doorstep. Inside was a handwritten letter from Obasi. When I arrived in this village, I came to vanish, and instead, I became seen for the first time. Thank you for not asking who I used to be. Thank you for feeding the body the world had forgotten. You gave me more than food. You gave me breath. I'm leaving now, not because I'm done, but because others are ready. This place no longer needs me, but I will always carry it. Obasi Emma read the letter 3 times. She didn't cry. She simply folded it, kissed the edge, and placed it beside her bed. That evening, when she went to the mango tree, the same tree where the story began, Obasi's bench was empty, but carved into the bark in soft, neat letters were the words, "Sometimes the greatest gift you can give is to disappear when your light has already lit others." Months later, a man in flowing white robes came to Rise Village. He looked wealthy, but walked humbly. He asked for Emma. He knelt before her and whispered, "He saved my son's company. My boy was about to take his own life. Obasi sent funds. No one knew. He didn't even leave a name." Emma nodded. "He was a shadow who chose to shine." She said, "More letters arrived over time. From Ghana, from Senegal, from Kenya. All signed only with a simple sketch of a mango tree. The people of Rise Village never saw him again, but they felt him die in the shade of the new health center, in the laughter of girls reciting poetry at dusk, in the smell of plantains cooking on solar stoves, in the names of newborn boys now called Madu and Emma. She lived many more years. Her hair turned silver. Her steps slowed, but she never stopped teaching. Each evening, she sat on the bench under the mango tree, greeting strangers. One day, a little girl asked Nana Emma, "Who was the man who built all this?" Emma smiled. "He was hungry," she said, "and I fed him." And in that, she told the whole story. Not of wealth. Not of status. But of faith. Faith that feeding one's soul can feed 1,000 futures.